evening, dear members of the Standing Committee, dear members of the Bureau and invited guests, ladies and gentlemen. You are mostly welcome. And I would also like to say thank you for joining this extraordinary Standing Committee today. You all know why it's called, because of the Russian war against Ukraine. But I would like to say a few words before we go to the agenda. This meeting is being recorded. Interpretation is available in English and Russian, no other languages. And please use the chat function to request the floor. If you are not speaking, please turn off the sound. And I do also kindly request you to limit your intervention to 3 minutes. A draft agenda have been circulated. And I will give some remarks, followed by Secretary General Montella, and we will also hear from Foreign Minister of Ukraine, Mr. Dmitry Kuleba. And prior to the debate, I will invite our 2 additional guest speakers from Ukraine, former President Petro Poroshenko and Ms. Yeremia Kravchuk, who serves as Deputy Chairman of the Committee on Humanitarian and Information Policy in the Verkhovna Rada. And after that, will I open the floor for interventions. And by this, do I kindly ask you if we could adapt today's agenda. Thank you very much, dear colleagues. Now I will go further on with my opening remarks. Dear colleagues, 16 days have passed since the Russian aggression against Ukraine turned into an open war. When we gathered 2 weeks ago in Vienna for our winter meeting, we had to change our agenda, and we did so with no problem, because the most important issue for us at that time, it was...
It's the Turkish interpreter. Okay.
It was the the fact that the Russian Federation had begun a full-scale invasion of Ukraine. After that, it had been, as I mentioned, 16 very difficult days, mostly for the Ukrainian people. We have followed it, all of us, in the newspaper, in telephone contacts, in personal relations. And I am therefore very, very grateful that you managed to attend today's meeting, dear colleagues. Because as members of the Standing Committee, as head of the delegations and elected officers of the Assembly, it's important that we act as responsible parliamentarians in the name of OSCE Parliamentary Assembly. And there is a lot we can do, and we have to act. And I must say that we can also act in a very different ways, not only in the parliament, but also back home in our constituency. Because I know, just as you do, that our voters, the citizens, are very upset, have questions to raise, and we can reply on them. We can give remarks, but we can also put our voice forward in the parliament and ask for legislations to put pressure on our government for support for Ukraine, and also support for end this war with its illegal activities. I am as well glad that our colleagues and their families from the Ukrainian parliament are still safe today. And when we met 2 weeks ago, we didn't know what awaited them, nor did they. And I do, on behalf of all of us, send them our full support. And unfortunately, I must say that the situation on the ground is getting worse and worse. We see daily footage of civilian infrastructures, houses, shops, schools, hospitals targeted by the Russian military. There are more and more civilian victims to this conflict. The humanitarian situation is dire. All of us are deeply moved by what's happening in Ukraine. We want to do something. And as the Osce PA, we have been very active since the illegal annexation of Crimea 8 years ago. And we will continue to call a spade for a spade. The war of aggression is a clear and gross violation of the most basic norms of international law, as well as the OSCE principles and commitments. The international community must remain united in condemning in the strongest terms. Our Parliamentary Assembly will remain vocal about the money issues that we have been brought to the fore, the protection of civilians, the impact of the war on nuclear safety, but also the clear deterioration of media freedom and freedom of assembly in Russia. This Sunday, I will lead a high-level delegation to visit the Polish border with Ukraine. We will see what Poland is doing to help the millions of refugees who have already left Ukraine. We will highlight the unprecedented wave of solidarity expressed throughout Europe. I have been in phone contact with the head of the delegation in Georgia and Moldova, and also got their impression of the development. I know that there is a lot of refugees from Ukraine to Moldova, and also refugees who seek further on to Romania. But it's also all over Europe, and Europe is preparing to give access for the refugee from Ukraine. The war and its long-term impact on European security will continue to be at the center of our debates. I discussed this at length earlier this week in London with our British colleagues who will host our annual session in July. Today is another opportunity for us to exchange and to determine how parliamentarians in OSCE PA can be part of the solution to this war. After the winter meeting in Vienna, did I request Secretary General Montella to draft a plan for action for the Assembly. And the draft was sent out to members of the Standing Committee last Thursday, the 3rd of March. There have happened a lot of things since that, but I see that the draft is well prepared. Thank you very much. And it's still relevant. And I hope that you will have comments on this and also to give advice and your thoughts so we can continue to act in the most efficient way as parliamentarians. I do as well look forward to hearing from Minister Kuleba on how he thinks that the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly can help. And today I ask you to take all the information from both the interventions, but also from our discussion later on, with you back home to use it in your debates, as I mentioned earlier. Because OSCE parliamentarians, we have the duty to use our expertise and political leverage to push for more assistance to Ukraine and support mediation efforts, including by promoting OSCE tools. And I hope these few thoughts can frame our debate today and mark a step towards concrete actions. And I have also noticed that the Ukrainian ambassador to OSCE in Vienna is here today. Mostly welcome. We are grateful that you join us. I do also would like to say thank you to the Polish chairpersonship in office, because I think Poland do a fantastic job to focus how to help Ukraine and how to promote peace and a peaceful solution. And I am grateful that we can work together as a united family inside OSCE with the governmental side, the parliamentarian side, and ODIHR, and the special representatives in OSCE, because we need to focus for peace, security, and the integrity of Ukraine. Thank you. And now I will give the floor for remarks by Secretary General of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, Mr. Roberto Montella. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam President. I will begin with a public apology. I think I owe a public apology to Minister Kuleba. Minister, dear Dimitro, we met in Stockholm in December last year, and in our exchange, you concluded our meeting saying, well, are you aware that war is coming to Ukraine? And I must be honest with you, that evening, the evening before that meeting, I had a brief exchange with Sergei Lavrov, and we were trying to understand in our informal dinner whether this is something that was really going to happen, or it was, as I was told, no, this is just an hysteria that you and your friends in the West have. So I kind of didn't take you that seriously that day when you told us that war was coming. So for this, I publicly apologize to you. What started on the 24th of February is a turning point in the history of our organization, and I think in the history of Europe. This is something that most of us could not even foresee or imagine. Of course, we were concerned about the build-up at the borders of Ukraine, but we never thought that it would go this far. I think as the 24th of February is a turning point, I think the way we behave in this phase, the way we will react to this war will determine how we will be as an organization and how each of us will be individually. And I think it's very important that we conduct ourselves in a way that will allow us to be able to look at ourselves in the mirror in the future and talk to our children in the future. I'm here to talk about the OSCPA contribution. The President referred to a brainstorming exercise that we've done within the Secretariat and a document I've sent out to all delegations last Friday. This document is for the delegations to look on, suggest, advise, and maybe move forward with some proposals. In this proposal that I've made, I thought it's the main pillar is that we have to be extremely realistic about what the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly can really do. Because I have been flooded by messages by many members who, of course, seeing the outrage of what we are all seeing on our screens, want to do something. But I think we have to be clear that the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly has a certain mandate, has certain capabilities. So it is my responsibility to make sure that what we do and what we will propose is, first of all, realistic, second of all, useful for the solution of this conflict, and third, that it also benefits what I call the end users, and normally, in this case, the victims of this conflict. So what can we do, and what we have already done? First point is public messaging. Here we have come up with strong statements from the very beginning, the first evening when it was only Lugansk and Donetsk, and afterwards there was bureau statements, there were joint statements, there was a full assembly statement at the end of our standing committee. So we've been very vocal also in other dimensions on the propaganda and on the human rights with public statements. And I think a parliamentary assembly made of parliamentarians from 57 countries representing 1 billion citizens can do that, can call things what they are and can make public statements. I also want to reassure you, Minister Kuleba, that in this assembly, we call things what they are. The president said spade to spade. Here, we don't sugarcoat what's happening. We say what it is, and we've done this from the very beginning already in 2014. In the call, you will see there is Senator Ben Cardin, who drafted a resolution in 2014 calling for what had happened back then, a clear, gross, uncorrected violations of the Helsinki Final Act, which is our foundation document, and also called who was responsible for that. So here we don't shy away, we don't use necessarily too much diplomatic language when it's necessary, we call things what they are. I feel comfortable in having this position because in this assembly, we are the ones, and I personally am the one, who's always done a lot of outreach, has done a lot of trying to build bridges, has always tried to also speak to our friends in the West and trying to speak to those we have disagreements with in a different way or trying to improve dialogue. So I'm a great promoter of dialogue and I'm a great promoter of going out of the usual prejudice that we've had in the West. So now I don't feel any fear in being very firm in our position and calling what we have seen what it really is. So no worries here. We will not sugarcoat in our languages or in our messages what we actually see. Another thing that we can do as Parliamentary Assembly is this current meeting here, an extraordinary session. The President called for an extraordinary session of the Standing Committee. This is an opportunity for all heads of delegations to express what they see, to express their frustration or their proposals, and hopefully to create also a channel of communication. I hope that our colleagues also from the Russian Federation are connected and they will want to intervene in this debate. Another activity that we have put in place is field activities. There is a proposal from the Polish delegation, whom I thank publicly here, Barbara Bartusz, the head of delegation, to invite a delegation of senior members of this assembly to go to Poland to see how the Polish government and authorities are reacting to the refugee flow, and also to show us some facilities at the border. For this, I thank Poland. I had some reservation on this visit because I want to make sure that what we do doesn't hinder the human rights efforts that are done on the border. And, you know, like, of course, there is a lot of people now going to the border also to show presence, to call international attention. I don't think there is lack of international attention on what is happening. But of course, if we are invited by the Polish authorities, we will be gladly accepting this invitation, visiting the border this Sunday and Monday. And we'll report back, of course, to the Standing Committee on the findings that we observe. Another point which we can do as Parliamentary Assembly, and I put it as the first point of my proposal last week, is dialogue. I know that this is very unpopular at this very moment because the President mentioned just a visit to the UK. Everybody is really very much in the mode of we need to sanction, we need to be absolutely firm in condemnations. And I absolutely subscribe to that. But I think the very essence of this assembly is that this is a platform for dialogue. So if this is the only tool we have left, we have to actually try also to activate it. Now, the modality of activating this dialogue are to be seen. We've seen already that there's been a track, the delegations that have met for 3 times, the Russian and the Belarusian delegations that have met for 3 times in Belarus and at the border between Belarus and Poland. That has produced some minor results, I might say. The failure or not ensuring humanitarian corridor was very regrettable. So as Parliamentary Assembly, we will offer this platform for dialogue. There are undergoing some discussions. Our Vice President, Zaiguliev, is currently at the Antalya Forum. I will join him later. And he is there to also talk to the sides that are there in order to facilitate and discuss a possible initiative that this Parliamentary Assembly might take. But this is still in the making, but this is what this Assembly can offer. And again, we need to be absolutely realistic on what this Parliamentary Assembly can do. I do not think that this is the tool where we will solve this crisis. I think that we can facilitate in a way that doesn't hinder to other tracks that have already been activated, but accompany the process and of course show the goodwill of all our parliamentarians who want to contribute to the solution of this conflict. And I've also been in touch with the parliamentary assemblies of the Council of Europe, the Parliamentary Assembly of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly, and of course, today also with the Parliamentary Assembly of the CIS. These are our natural partners. We always work with them. So we have exchanged notes and seen what kind of activities they're putting in motions in this current situation. Of course, you as parliamentarians can work in your respective parliaments, and I'm sure already I've seen already some letters being sent. Some parliaments have already drafted resolutions. Some have made initiatives. So we welcome anything that you can do, of course, on the national front and domestic front in your respective parliament. And I will conclude, Madam President, with one last comment. And I would like to, because there's been a lot of talk whether there is images of propaganda that we see or whether these are made up figures. I mean, we are in the 2022. I mean, we know what is reported by a simple mobile phone is actually true. So we are all touched by what we are seeing on these videos and what we are seeing on our screens. And I think if we really want to find a solution to this terrible tragedy, I think if we always put at the center, who is it that we do this for? The citizens, the victims, the poor woman who is coming out of a hospital, or the kid that is dead in a street while trying to go for a safe passage in a humanitarian convoy. If we have that in mind, I think those images will talk, of course, to us who deal with this business, activists, be it in Lisbon, in Paris, in London. But I'm sure those images must talk also to the souls, to the minds, also of Siloviki or high generals or people who are, it's impossible that they don't touch the minds and the souls of people who are also in the higher ranks of the military and the intelligence. So I really appeal to all of us to really try to make an effort of dignity and try to keep in mind that all of this, all we are doing it for is to save lives, to save people. And let's make sure that you, who are the representatives of 1 billion citizens, do exactly that. Focus on trying to save as many lives as possible and put an end to this drama. Thank you very much, Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary General, and for your encouraging word, and also for your thoughts, as I see as very important. And the dialogue, let's continue the dialogue. And I can just tell you, just as you, I have been in touch the last week with head of delegations, with European Union on different levels, with several different US authorities. I have been in touch with United Nations, with Osce, with the International Court, Criminal Court, with the Ukrainian NGOs, and trying to build some kind of network established so we could work further on. But now I will go further on the speakers list and give the floor to Ukraine's Foreign Minister, Mr. Dmytro Kuleba. The floor is yours, and we are all of us are looking forward to listen to you and what you have to tell us.
We're not sure he's connected, so we'll just see. 5 seconds.
Is Mr. Kuleba connected?
We can just move to former President Poroshenko, and then we'll go back to the Foreign Minister.
Thank you. The connection to Ukraine is not easy, so we have to wait for Mr. Foreign Minister for some minutes, but I will give the floor now to former President of Ukraine, Mr. Poroshenko, who is with us online. Please give us your thoughts and impression of the war and what you think we can contribute for a peaceful, for peace and end of the war with respect of the Ukrainian territorium and integrity. The floor is yours, Mr. Poroshenko.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam President Sederfeld, My dear friends, colleagues, first of all, let me be frank with you, and we simply have no time but true and direct words. Even at the 16th day, the full-fledged war, not a conflict, by the way, this is the full-fledged war that is raging in Ukraine, is seen as something far from your seats, from Vienna or Brussels, Berlin or Paris. And it is really painful to understand it from perspective in Kiev, where from the place where we are now to the closest Russian tanks, less than 10 kilometers. And from any other city of Ukraine, that is the fighting the Russian aggression with the courage and Ukrainian people. We greatly value the support that has been lended to Ukraine by Osce and its individual participating states. But ask yourself, is your support enough to stop the war in Ukraine? Is it enough to end humanitarian catastrophe, which Madam President very greatly described and which is happening just next to your door? Is your support enough to win back the peace, stability, security across Europe? And a candid answer would be a negative one. It is not enough. The future of Europe, and particularly of Osce, is being decided here in Ukraine. And that is why we fight, we lead, is much bigger than only about Ukraine. Our fight is about Europe and the whole free world. The world is that based on the rule of law, not on the rule of force. The world is respecting the inviolability of the borders, not imperial redrawing of borders. The world that values peace and security, not aggression and war. And it is about a world of human dignity and respect for human rights. Ukrainian struggle is not local. The entire Ukraine is now on fire, from east to west, from north to south. And as now, can you imagine, more than 7% of our 40 million Ukrainian population have fled the country. Many more around Ukraine has been displaced. And yesterday, UN Secretary General recognized that the war in Ukraine has caused the fastest growing refugee crisis since World War II. Can you imagine? Such hatred, destruction, grief, human suffering inflicted by Putin, Ukraine and Europe have not witnessed it since 1940s. So do not think that Ukraine is somewhere far away. Do not deceive yourself that Putin will stop on Ukrainian soil. No. Please do not hope that already tomorrow the present events in Ukraine will seem distant and normal pre-war life will get back to existence. The world will never be same like before the 24th of February. The terrible truth is that Putin wants the war. Ukraine is just his first shot. He goes after the free world. Next would be any Moldova, Georgia, Poland, Lithuania, or any OSCE participating state. Putin appetites no limits and no borders. He threatens, he blackmails, he bribes, he wants you to leave Ukraine alone so that he can come tomorrow for his next victim. Think of that, what Putin could do more if you show weakness today in Ukraine. If today he strives to break the road from occupied Donbass to Crimea, why doesn't he decide next to break his road to Kaliningrad through Lithuania? And when he hears that any of you is not ready to engage on the side of Ukraine, it makes him happy. When he hears that the airspace above Ukraine will not be closed, he gets ready for the new assault, more dramatic, more cruel, more inhuman. And I bet all of you have seen the horrible pictures of the destroyed maternity house and Children's Hospital in Mariupol. By the way, the lady you see yesterday on the photo today gave birth to the young girl, fortunately. Putin's soldiers bombarded this Wednesday heavily with a hate and no mercy. And what else could be more obvious to prove the crimes that Putin commits against humanity than this shooting of pregnant women and newborn in Ukraine? Attempts to justify this attack by Minister Lavrov show how immoral and inhuman are Putin's complaints. They have no moral limits and will do more human tragedies unless we stop them together. We are grateful for every OSCE participating states that has joined Ukraine's claim before the International Criminal Court to investigate the atrocities Russia is committing in Ukraine. We have to explore every single possible in order to bring Russia war criminal to justice. And I call the Parliamentary Assembly to contribute to these efforts, and they have to understand accountability is inevitable. And the most vivid example is the besieged Mariupol. Already 1,400 citizens, civilian victims were killed in this besieged city because of constant massive shelling, airstrikes, and missile shooting. No food, no electricity, no heating, no water. This week, the little girl died because of the lack of the water. People are making water by melting snow. And how many more people in Ukraine should die to melt the snow in the hearts of some Western politicians who are still reluctant to help Ukraine more and now? We have no doubt that the day will come when everybody in Russia, those who plan this war against Ukraine, who gave criminal orders, and those who fulfilled those orders, everybody will face justice, especially Vladimir Putin. We are grateful for every OSCE participating state that joined the sanction against Russia, and lately against Belarus as a co-aggressor in Putin's war against Ukraine. And if some among you is still hesitant, think twice on which side you are, on which side of the history your country is. And if we believe in power of Helsinki Final Act, then we have no right to for mistake neither with the aggressor. And if we believe in the principle of the indivisible security, then we have no rights to lend Putin a victory, neither a chance to let him get away with his crime against humanity, genocide he is committing against Ukraine. And if we believe in peace, stability, and security for all, then we have no right to surrender to the one who challenges our fundamentals. Neither have we bow our heads before him in loyalty for Russian oil and gas. It is a time to acknowledge the sooner we stop Putin, the less human, political, and economic losses Europe will face. Our fight can last just for weeks if all decisive and resolute action are taken at once. Or it could last for years if only half step is taken, with more devastating economic consequences, first of all, for Europe. It is time to stop Putin, to stop afraid of Putin. He is weak, believe me. His army is incapable, and Ukraine army demonstrated every day. Putin has lost 13,000 soldiers in the battlefield and hundreds tank and armored vehicle for almost 16 days of war. And we are not afraid of Putin any longer. Don't be afraid of Putin, you too. Let's stop Putin here in Ukraine and repel his plan for war and other countries before the situation spirals into a more dangerous one. There are some immediate steps to be taken now. First, immediate and unconditional ceasefire, creation of the humanitarian corridor for the victims on the territory of Ukraine with the unimpeded access to international humanitarian organization. 3, withdrawal of the Russian armed forces from territory of Ukraine in the international recognized border, verified by international observers, and I mean Crimea as well. for return the SMM OSCE to Ukraine. Next, access to the international humanitarian organization to the affected area to evaluate the scale of destruction and losses, as well as to search and to identify the killed and missed person. We also call upon OSCE autonomous institution to redouble its efforts in addressing Russia's war, since Russia is intensifying its disinformation campaign. Exactly OSCE representative on media has to play its role. Further ODIHR engagement is crucial to address gross human rights violation committed by the Russian Federation. OSCE High Commissioner on the National Minority also has to say, don't keep silence, especially about Russia's false narrative concerning the national minorities that were simply used to unleash a total war against Ukraine. Bad news is that Putin still believes that he can change the course of history and twist from the complete loser to winner. Good news is that his time is up. And if we stand united against him, this has happened. Every day there must be new sanctions. Every day of half measures and hesitation results in dozens of loss of life of Ukrainian and cut of all the Russian and Belarusian bank from the SWIFT. Ban import energy resources. Stop sending €500 million per day to Russia in terms of additional financial and economic support for reconstruction after war. Please think a kind of the Marshall Plan for Ukraine in terms of humanitarian assistance, grateful for sheltering of Ukrainian women and children, especially in Poland, Slovakia, Romania. In terms of political and moral support, we appeal to you is as follows. Come to Ukraine so that you can see and feel what war is and to prevent it in your countries. Stand up for Ukraine and our land to see the atrocities of the Russian aggressor and to prevent their invasion in your countries. Join the Ukrainian fight to feel the spirit of Ukrainian, our devotion, common values, and to remind ourselves that we must fight for our values because they don't come for granted. Let's defeat Putin in Ukraine today and save the world for a generation. The time of hesitation has passed. Glory to United Europe, glory to OSCE, glory to Ukraine. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Poroshenko, for your touching words and important remarks. As you have mentioned, there are a lack from Russia's side on respect of international agreed rules, of the rule of law. But you are not alone in Ukraine. There is a support, and we could see it with the sanction, the sending of ammunition, of weapons, humanitarian aid, financial support. And what has struck all of us so strong is the strength of the Ukrainian people, how you defend your country, what you have managed to do the 16 days that have passed since the aggressive war started. We are with you, both as OSCE PA and all of us who are parliamentarians in our national parliament. Thank you very much. Foreign Minister, Mr. Dmytro Kuleba haven't managed to join yet because of problem with internet. But Ms. Evgenia Kravchuk, Deputy Chairman of the Committee on Humanitarian and Information Policy, a member of the Verkhovna Rada, is with us. And I will give the floor to Honorable Kravchuk. The floor is yours. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair, distinguished members of the Assembly. I talked to you 16 days ago at the very first day of this war. I addressed you, and now I want to address you not only as a member of parliament, but also as a mother of 8-year-old daughter which doesn't go to school. Children have to hide in basements. 1 million children had to leave with their mothers the country. Also, I want to address you as a wife of husband who is right now near Kiev trying to stop Russian army to take our capital. Why I'm addressing you like this? Because there is a single family in Ukraine anymore that had not been affected by this war and by this country terrorist which Russia had become. What has changed since the last time I addressed you? I told you about the first casualty among children, a boy from Cherkasy Oblast. Now I'm sorry to say that we have confirmation at least of 78 dead kids in this war. They will never go to school. Their mothers will never hug them. Russia has not been targeting a military basis only. They are putting a war to the whole nation. They bombed more than 200 of schools and kindergartens, more than 30 hospitals. They bombed a maternity ward that was full of women that were going to deliver in few days. You probably saw these pictures. If it is not a red line that Russia crossed, then I don't know what is the red line for the world and for all the members of different organizations. But also what changed that different intelligence services said that Kyiv will be seized and taken by Russian soldiers in 48 or 72 hours since the beginning of the war. Well, guess what? It's been more than 16 days and Kyiv stays. And President Zelensky is there. Government is working. Members of parliament are working. And we will be keeping and will be holding. But of course, we need your help. We need your help from your national governments. We need your help as members of your national parliaments, and help not with only statements. We had statements a lot for 8 years since 2014. Right now, by the March 10th, as our Minister of Defense says, there were more civilians killed in this war than military, than soldiers from all the defense units. Can you imagine the total number? And I'm sorry to say that this number increases with every day. That's why we're urged for the no-fly zone over Ukraine. That's why we ask for more weapons. That's why we ask for battle jets, for the air defense systems to close our sky ourselves. To do it if you do not have the courage to do it by the NATO or by other countries. Right now, the green corridors had started, and we really hope that Russia will not be trying to violate the green corridors as they did all these days prior. The city of Mariupol hadn't had a chance to leave. No women, no men hadn't had a chance to leave. What other things that we ask you is to ban the membership of Russia in all international organizations, in OSCE as well. I'm also a member of PACE, of Parliamentary Assembly of Council of Europe. You probably know how conservative this organization is, but we already managed to stop Russia right now to take a place in the Parliamentary Assembly of Committee of Ministers. And on Tuesday, we'll have a vote in PACE to ban, to exclude Russia from Council of Europe. We urge you to have a courage to do the same. Also, we urge you to have a courage to put the total embargo on whatever Russia sells. Why? Because every dollar, every euro, European and other countries are paying to Russia returns as a bullet to innocent people. Just imagine that every dollar returns as a bullet. Also, I'll be short because there will be so many things told, but to sum it up, When you go in the evening to your families, to hug your kids, to hug your grandkids, to hug your partner, just imagine that Ukrainian families are still in the basement, with no electricity, with no food, with no water, but what they do have in this basement is hope. I'm always asked in these days, are you afraid? You know, I'm not afraid. I'm angry and I'm determined. And determined as many, many Ukrainians. 92% of Ukrainians believe that we will win in this war. And we do need your support to win in this war. Thank you for all the help you provided. I think it's a very good idea to go to Poland. I think it would be good to go to Romania as well, as they gain a lot of refugees from Ukraine as well. We are thankful for all the bordering countries for the help they provide, and we need to be united. We need to be united because we face not just a country to find a dialogue with. We face a country which became a terrorist. The army became terrorist, National Guards became terrorist, all the secret service of Russia became terrorists. We need to stop this because you have to understand that the world, the Third World War had already started, and Russia is opposing the whole civilized world. But right now, only Ukraine fights back, literally fights back for the whole world's sake. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Kravchuk. It's difficult for us who are not in Ukraine and have the same experience as you have to really, really understand what's happening. We listen to you, we read the news, and I can just tell you, when we had a winter meeting, I and my colleagues, we thought about Mikita Potorayev, who went back to go to Ukraine for the war, when we could go back home to our safe homes with no problem. But we stand behind you and we do whatever we can to support you. And you, as you said, it's illegal, everything. I was in contact with Doctors Without Borders, as well as the Red Cross. And what they told me, it was that there is no respect for the Red Cross, no respect for the hospitals inside Ukraine by Russia. And it's proved by the news that we hear. There is no respect either for the diplomatic agreed humanitarian corridors. I have followed the news with Ukrainian people who have been trapped. But we are with you and we will continue. And what we will do today is discuss how can we as parliamentarians inside OSCE PA support peace in Ukraine with respect for Ukraine's territorium and integrity. Thank you. What I understood now is that Foreign Minister of Ukraine, Mr. Dmytro Kuleba, haven't been able to connect so far. So I will give the floor, and I'm very pleased that we have with us today Ambassador Yevgeny Tsimbalyuk, Ukrainian ambassador for OSCE in Vienna. So I will give the floor to you to give us your presentation and thoughts about what we can do, and maybe as well a picture from the situation in Vienna, what it looks like, and your thoughts about what will be the next step and what should we think about. Thank you very much. And Mr. Ambassador Tsimbalyuk, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam President. My sincere apologies for my Minister Kuleba. He is not able to connect, unfortunately, but I have his messages, his main points, and it will be an honor for me to deliver his message to our meetings today. So I deliver his message. Dear members of the Parliamentary Assembly, thank you for inviting me. I'm a diplomat to the bone, but talking diplomatically today is difficult. For 16 days now, Russia has been waging a brutal war of aggression against Ukraine from all directions. My country is bleeding, but it has not fallen and will not fall. We will fight until we prevail. And we need your help to be able to defend ourselves, but also the core OSCE principles, from a barbaric attempt to destroy all rules, destroy peace and security in Europe. Being unable to achieve a single strategic goal of his so-called operation, actually war, Putin resorted to ugly tactics of terror against Ukrainian civilian men, women and children. Mass war crimes are being committed as we speak. Shelling, bombings and strikes on civilian infrastructure, destroying residential areas, strangling besieged Mariupol by preventing humanitarian access to over 400,000 civilians. 3,000 newborn babies in Mariupol already lack food and medicine and may soon die. People melt snow, lacking access to water. 6-year-old Tanya died 3 days ago in Mariupol, died of dehydration. Over 70 children have already died because of Putin's war on peaceful Ukrainian cities. A maternity and children's hospital in Mariupol was destroyed by air bombs while pregnant women were inside. Russia confirmed it struck the hospital, but blatantly denied that patients were inside. Despite dozens of photos and videos of injured and scared pregnant women after the strike, they went as far as to claim those are actresses and blood on them is a makeup. Every new day of war claims more innocent lives. Russians shoot people fleeing besieged cities. Russian soldiers fire on civilians in order to break the resistance. Europe has not seen this scale of barbarism since Nazis committed their atrocities during World War II. Putin overtly denies Ukraine's right to exist and remains determined to destroy our state. He believes in his impunity. Haven't we seen this in the past? Do you have any doubts that we are witnessing the rise of another madman seeking a final solution, quote-unquote solution, for sovereign nation in Europe? Has Europe not failed before trying to stop the aggressor by appeasement or hoping to sit it all out? Later, Europe was forced to engage anyway, but at much higher price. We should learn the lessons of the past and stop pretending this is limited to Ukraine. Putin has already started a European war. Putin's choice leaves us no other options but to build an anti-war coalition that would stop him. If we all fail today, tomorrow Russian tanks will cross your borders. I know many of you believe that OSCE, and especially its Parliamentary Assembly, is a platform for dialogue. But let's be honest, Putin leaves no room for a real dialogue. He uses it only to achieve his goals. How many times had Russian envoys to OSCE being denied plans to invade Ukraine? I call upon all Parliamentary Assembly members to convince your capitals to take additional concrete and ambitious steps that would maintain peace in Europe and save Ukrainian lives. It is time to act now and act resolutely. Only our strength and unity will stop Putin. Sanctions drain blood from Russia's war machine. Stopping the purchase of Russia's oil and gas means fewer rockets and shells will fall on Ukrainian civilians, including children. Helping Ukraine protect its skies means saving civilians, saving children, and protecting critical infrastructure. Even a limited no-fly zone would be a game changer. By giving Ukraine more weapons, including air defense systems, we can save more lives. Dear friends, Ukrainians will keep up the fight. We fight for our right to exist, for our freedom, for our people, for our land. We did not attack anyone. We are on the right side of the history and we fight for the right cause. By defending ourselves, we will also protect the values of the free world. We will prevail. The question is the price. It highly depends on the will of the free world to defend and support Ukraine and act now. I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. And send our best regards to your Foreign Minister, Mr. Dmytro Kuleba, as well as to your President Zelensky, who all of us follow on the news, on Twitter, and I think as well, Foreign Minister Kuleba as Zelensky are, they are the shining star in this terrible war, because that gives spirit. That gives spirit both to the people and to us who are outside and support Ukraine, because they can mention what is the problem and what is the need. Thank you once again for your intervention. And now I will close number 3 as well. Thank you. And go further on to the open debate with the perspectives of parliamentary dialogue. And before, we have already had the guest speakers. So now I will open the speakers list. And how many?
We have 27, 28.
It's 27 speakers on the list so far. So I do kindly request you to stay to maximum 3 minutes of a speech, so I can give the floor to everybody who have asked for the floor. First speaker on the list is Mr. Richard Hudson from United States. The floor is yours, Mr. Hudson.
Well, thank you, Madam President. I want to thank our friends from Ukraine for making the time to share with us today. It's very important for us to hear directly from you, and our hearts are with you, our prayers are with you, but also we stand with you and we'll continue to support you financially with defensive weapons and in every way we can. Colleagues, like so many of you, I've been horrified by the ongoing aggression of Putin's forces in Ukraine. The tragedy is inflicting an incalculable cost on the people of Ukraine. This tragedy, we must say it clearly. These actions were utterly unprovoked and are fully the responsibility of Vladimir Putin and those who enable him. We must collectively continue to support Ukraine and do everything in our power to make sure this aggression against Ukraine and against the very principles that our organization is based on do not succeed. Colleagues, as I said in Vienna when I convened the first committee, I believe in the meaningful dialogue that our assembly enables, even when our viewpoints, even when the viewpoints that are expressed, I might personally disagree with. However, I also believe that this dialogue has always derived its greatest value from the fact that it's based on a common starting point, a set of principles forged over years of discussions and consummated in Helsinki in 1975. Our assembly since 2014 condemned Russia's clear, gross, and uncorrected violations of all Helsinki principles in its aggression against Ukraine, and has called for concrete action by the international community in response. We are the collective guardians of these principles and cannot stand by when one of our participating states viciously assaults another and tramples the fundamental underpinnings of our security order. As a result, I believe we cannot, as an assembly, continue with business as usual under these circumstances, and would suggest that we focus our time and energy on business directly linked to alleviating the suffering of the Ukrainian people as rapidly and effectively as possible. Let me also say that as individual parliamentarians and collectively as a parliamentary assembly, I think it is crucial that we are clear, loud, and specific in calling for an immediate ceasefire and calling on the Russians to immediately cease hostilities. I believe the OSCE itself has and will continue to play an important role in this crisis. I fully support the invocation of the Moscow mechanism by 45 OSCE countries, which established an expert mission that will help us hold to account those responsible for human rights abuses in Ukraine. Also appreciated the use of the VDOC by Ukraine and Baltic states to underline the threatening posture of Russian armed forces, including in Belarus, in the weeks leading up to Putin's second invasion of Ukraine. Let us continue to seek ways in which the OSCE, our assembly, and our national parliaments can support Ukraine and end this senseless and immoral aggression. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Richard Hudson. And Mr. Richard Hudson is chair of the First Committee on Political Affairs and Security. Next speaker on my list is head of the Ukrainian delegation, Mr. Mikita Potorayev. He will be followed by head of the Finnish delegation, Mr. Wilhelm Junila. Mr. Mikita Potorayev, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have to start with urgent message for Turkish delegation. Please, my colleagues, my friend, close friend of mine, unbelievably brave Polish journalist, Polish Andruszeczka, wrote me right now from Mariupol. In a mosque, in a shelter, in a mosque, Mariupol mosque, 86 citizens of Turkey now. Among them, there are 34 children. Mosque is under severe bombing of Russia since 6 a.m. Please tell this information to President Erdogan immediately. 86 citizens of Turkey, together with, among them, again, 34 children, can be killed any moment. Please, Turkish colleagues, pass this information to your president immediately. I'm not sure if my friend, brave Polish Piotr Andruszeczka, will be able to contact me because he is in Mariupol risking his life to inform the world of all these war crimes. So, and now let me come back to what I wanted to tell you. Colleagues, OSCE was established to keep peace and to help to strengthen and develop democracy, to protect human rights. We see that, unfortunately, OSCE wasn't so effective. I can tell you, my friends, what should be done, what had to be done to stop Russia much earlier, to put severest sanctions many years ago when Putin started to destroy democracy and violate human rights in Russia. Nobody wanted to provoke him. Nobody wanted to provoke him supporting our European and NATO wishes. So, okay, nobody provoked Putin. Putin came to Ukraine. I won't repeat all these examples. I just want to stress that Russia should be defined as terrorist state. Russian army is terrorist organization. Russian FSB, GRU, Ministry of Internal Affairs are terrorist organizations. I won't use a lot of time to give you more examples of war crimes. Now, I would like to share you some names. Please, your attention. Metro, Auchan, Procter & Gamble, Danone, Nestle, Unilever, Henkel, Pepsi, Coca-Cola, Lactalis, Philip Morris, British American Tobacco, Japan Tobacco International, Spar, Leroy Merlin, Real, OK, Colgate Palmolive, Johnson & Johnson, Reckitt Benckiser Group, Billa, Castorama, Kimberly-Clark, plus German, Austrian, and Swiss banks. They continue to work in Russia. I know your position, my friends, as parliamentarians. I know. And things that I'm going to say, it's not about you personally, but let me be a little bit politically incorrect. I think that it's time to understand that working in Russia is directly to support this newly born Nazi regime. So especially, well, I don't want to even go deeper. I just want to turn your attention that it's not Putin. It's not Putin fly on all these, planes. It's not Putin shoot from his artillery. It's not Putin himself. Ordinary Russian guys supported in their country. They understand clearly what are they doing. They see all these living areas. They see even eyes of civilians in terminally occupied Ukrainian villages and towns. When they shoot, they just for fun or to murder, because the Russian army act themselves as looters in Ukraine. And it is documented because we see things in their trucks stolen from Ukrainian houses, from civilians. And we have reports from our special forces who go deep into terminally occupied territories about dozens of people killed just in the streets because they just wanted to get to their village store to get a bottle of water, a piece of bread. So it's not Putin, it's all Russia, Nazi state. And I can tell you, absolutely political and correct. Sanctions should be as severe as it can be. No Western product, no even, I don't know, Western small pack of cigarettes, no Western good. They have to feel what, and they won't feel any piece of starving that people in Mariupol now feel, but they have to feel the responsibility. They have collective responsibility for all these crimes. And they have to pay, like Nazi paid in 1945. New Nazi state has to pay again. Thank you.
Mr. Mikita Potorayev, for your intervention and remarks. And our thoughts are with the innocent people in the mosque. And I really hope that I survive and that I are not victims when they have taken shelter in the mosque. And now I will give the floor to head of the Finnish delegation, Mr. Wilhelm Junnila. He will be followed by the head of the Switzerland delegation, Mr. Andrei Savini. Mr. Wilhelm Junnila, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Madam President, thank you for your leadership and for hosting this extraordinary meeting. And thank you, Mr. Poroshenko and Mr. Potorayev, for your touching input. Diplomacy begins with respect, and currently there is an utmost disregard for that from the Russian Federation. I understand the effects of fog of war, but this also applies to external relations. Russia denies of even invading the sovereign nation of Ukraine, which shows a total lack of respect for everyone concerned. What's even more disgraceful is that at the same time they demand a surrender from Ukraine, the very same nation they just denied of having ever attacked. But it goes beyond that. Russia is behaving very unprofessionally and keeps on threatening other nations in addition to their heinous attack on Ukraine. For example, spokeswoman for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Maria Zakharova, called on other countries to stop distributing weapons to Ukraine so that it would not have the means to defend itself. But even that is not as disgraceful as the manner in which they rationalized it. They said it poses enormous risk to international civilian aviation. Can you imagine this kind of rhetoric, considering what happened with Malaysian Airlines MH17? As Mr. Poroshenko said, Ukraine is on fire. People have been misplaced and there is a huge refugee crisis. How could the OSCE provide the means of dialogue, support, and resolution to cease hostilities and end this war if the overall picture is so drastically different between Russia and the rest of the Western world? I believe every one of you knows that we could do more. What we need now is the courage to act. We may fear the consequences for ourselves, but the consequences of inaction may be worse for the world. Make no mistake, we need an immediate ceasefire in Ukraine. Thank you.
Next speaker is Mr. Andreas Savini, head of the Switzerland delegation. He will be followed by head of the United States delegation, Mr. Steve Cohen. Mr. Andreas Savini, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Mrs. President, dear friends, colleagues. The situation in Ukraine continues to deteriorate dramatically. Ukrainian cities are under siege. They are facing repeated brutal attacks. Civilians and civilian infrastructure are being targeted. The horror of this war is such that even a children's hospital has been bombed in Mariupol. Countries close to Russia are also expressing their anxiety that this war will spread to their territory. Our entire OSCE area is destabilized. We, parliamentarians, cannot remain powerless towards the horror of this situation. We helped to establish the international public law, the humanitarian law, and human rights. We work to establish a security architecture to would guarantee peace to our people. Such war was unimaginable for many of us until 2 weeks ago. Today, our decades of effort are scored, but they are not undermined. We still have the power to influence our governments to continue to mobilize. That is what we are doing, and that is what we will continue to do. Today, I would like us all to put ourselves to the disposal of our OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, so that dialogue can quickly replace brutality of force. The Swiss delegation is ready to respond to those we needed. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Andreas Savini. Next speaker on my list is head of the United States delegation, Mr. Steve Cohen. He will be followed by head of the Polish delegation, Ms. Barbara Bartus. Mr. Steve Cohen, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. I want to thank you and the entire leadership for calling this extraordinary meeting. It's heartbreaking to watch what's going on in Ukraine, and it's totally an affront to the Helsinki Final Accords and to what we stand for. To have a member of our organization, the Russian Federation, totally tear asunder the accords, the final agreement, the rule of law, respect for nations, borders and states, and national integrity is an anathema. We had in the United States a phone call, a Zoom call from President Zelensky. He is a hero around the world, and he's been a great leader for Ukraine. He asked us several things, among which were to stop MasterCard and Visa from participating in Russian commerce. He asked for a stoppage of oil and gas imports into the United States and other countries as well. And we responded. the United States Congress, the President, has stopped importing oil and gas and energy products from Russia. We want to do everything we can, and I support the President as far as he goes. As far as he goes, I will go with him, and I will try to take him further. I've suggested that we sanction more oligarchs, including Mr. Abramov, who owns the ball team in Chelsea Limited, and to sanction him as well. Every time we take an oligarch's yacht, take his children out of school in the United States and don't let them vacation in Miami Beach and New York and wherever else they go in the United States, we put a new ally for us against Mr. Putin. Putin is a sociopath. He doesn't care about the harm he's causing the people of Ukraine and the people of the world. He has become the Hitler of the 22nd century the 21st century for his effective 21st century Stalingrad. He doesn't remember the terror and the horror that Germany caused the Russian people. He's causing it to the Ukrainian people. I agree with President Zelensky, this is a genocide. He didn't think Ukraine should exist. He doesn't think it should exist. He thinks that they should be destroyed. He wants to have as many people leave as possible and kill the others through starvation, bombs, or bullets. The United States Congress just passed a $13 billion package for humanitarian aid and weapons to help the Ukrainian people. We are united, Democrats and Republicans, sans maybe a handful, in support of Ukraine, and we will support Ukraine. Mr. Poroshenko, your remarks on television are inspiring. They've been a great help to the American people and the people of the world to see what's going on. Thank you, Madam Satterfeld. Whatever action you take, I will support. Take it to the max. Glory to Ukraine.
Thank you, Mr. Steve Cohen. Next speaker is head of the Polish delegation, Ms. Barbara Bartos. She will be followed by head of the Moldova delegation, Mr. Vladimir Boler. Ms. Barbara Bartos, the floor is yours. Thank you. Ms. Barbara Bartos, head of the Polish delegation, the floor is yours. And if something was missed, I will also mention that she will be followed by Mr. Vladimir Boler from head of the Moldova delegation. Ms. Barbara Bartos, the floor is yours.
She's just muted.
Thank you.
Interpreter.
Okay, interpreter.
Yes.
Can we put the...
Madam President, dear colleagues, 300 kilometers from Warsaw, behind the eastern border of my country, Poland, Russia has launched an unprecedented and brutal attack against its neighbor, Ukraine. Both countries are OSCE members. It is a gross violation of basic principles of the international law and the OSCE principles. War is not only a violation of international law, but also tragedy in the human dimension. War carries fear, suffering, and tears. Vladimir Putin, by invading Ukraine, turned the life of its citizens into hell. He filled the hearts and minds of our Ukrainian brothers and sisters with fear for their life and health. Many Ukrainian citizens, in particular women and children, were forced to flee from their homeland. They had to flee under a hail of bombs in haste and fearing about their future. From the beginning of the conflict, over 2 weeks, Poland received over 1.5 million of refugees, 1.5 million innocent, scared people who fled in panic their lives, seeing as their houses were turned into ruins. My country, Poland, its organizational structures, as well as throngs of my compatriots, we are making every effort to manage this humanitarian crisis. We have immediately launched a comprehensive system of assistance. It is sent directly to Ukraine, as well as to the Ukrainian citizens who are on the Polish side of the border. We simplified the procedures of border crossing. We created 35 major reception centers for foreigners. We adopted special legal solutions that make it easier for the refugees to legalize their stay and to live in these difficult circumstances. We ensured them access to education, healthcare, etc. Our government organized a special distribution center which collects all resources that will be later sent to Ukraine. In these unprecedentedly difficult times, our humanity is put to test. Millions of my compatriots opened their hearts and homes for our Eastern neighbors. We want to give to Ukrainians at least a substitute of normal life. Poland helps everyone who's in need, without exception, regardless of their origin. Refugees who flee from a war-torn Ukraine that are citizens of such countries as Nigeria, India, Afghanistan, and Pakistan. If they want and need our help, we provide them with assistance to get back home safely. This help is our voice of resistance against Putin's savagery. Ukrainians are fighting not only for their country, they're fighting for freedom, peace, and security for entire Europe. Let me stress this. They are fighting to keep Europe secure. President Poroshenko has already mentioned it. Also, back in 2008 in Tbilisi, the president of my country, Professor Lech Kaczyński, said exactly the same thing when Russia invaded Georgia. Lech Kaczyński, the Polish president who died in a plane crash in Smolensk. Dear colleagues, each of us has their work to do. Parliamentarians, politicians, citizens, neighbors, we all can and we all must get involved in helping Ukraine. And we also must encourage those who are not fully aware of what is happening in Ukraine to help too. Our role as parliamentarians from various countries is to
may I
encourage
remind
our
about the time?
governments.
Yes, of course. What?
Just one last remark. We must call upon our governments to be more determined in helping Ukraine and to adopt sanctions against Russia. Innocent people are dying, and women and children are raped, and I would like to say it in particular to Special Representative of the OSCE on gender. Madam President, thank you for your work, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in Poland.
Thank you very much, Ms. Barbara Bartos, and thank you for the invitation to Poland. I look forward for the important visit to get the broader picture about the situation for the refugees and the work that Poland do. Next speaker on my list is head of the Moldova delegation, Mr. Vladimir Boler. He will be followed by head of the Belarusian delegation, Mr. Andrei Savini. And now I give the floor to Mr. Vladimir Boler. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Уважаемая госпожа председатель, уважаемые коллеги, добрый день. Республика Молдова решительно осуждает военную агрессию со стороны Российской Федерации против Украины. Война повлияла на жизнь мирных жителей, которые покинули свои дома и ищут убежище в других странах. Начиная с первого дня войны против Украины, в Республику Молдова прибыло более 267 тысяч украинских беженцев, из которых 99 тысяч решили временно остаться в нашей стране. По числу украинских беженцев на душу населения Молдова уверенно лидирует в регионе. В стране действует 83 авторизованных центров временного размещения беженцев, из них 30 находятся в городе Кишиневе. Процесс определения и обустройства мест продолжается. Много беженцев разместились у родственников, знакомых и волонтеров. Молдавские власти уже начали делать первые шаги для интеграции беженцев из Украины. На период чрезвычайного положения граждане Украины имеют право работать в Республике Молдова без получения права временного проживания. А также дети украинских беженцев могут продолжить учебу в общеобразовательных учреждениях с обучением на родном языке, на украинском или на русском языке. Многие граждане Украины проезжают транзитом через нашу страну. Молдова и Румыния создали зеленый коридор, чтобы облегчить транзит украинских беженцев в Евросоюз и в другие страны. В Молдове запустили бесплатные автобусные рейсы и организовали специальный железнодорожный рейс для перевозки беженцев из Кишинева в город Ясы. Кроме того, комиссия по чрезвычайным ситуациям правительства Республики Молдова разрешила организацию чартерных рейсов из Кишиневского аэропорта. Более 700 беженцев из Украины покинули нашу страну за последние 2 суток и отправились специальными чартерными рейсами в Израиль и Болгарию. В ближайшие дни запланированы рейсы в Германию, Турцию, Польшу, Израиль и Испанию. Ситуация в регионе и Европе беспрецедентная, а количество людей, прибывающих из соседней страны, постоянно растет. Притом,
Thank you, Mr. Vladimir Bolea, for your remarks and also for the humanitarian assistance.
He has a connection problem.
We have lost you, Mr. Vladimir Bolea. Are you still there?
Алло, да.
We lost you again. I will give the floor to you later, and now I will go further on the speakers list and then see if we manage to connect again later, because we can't hear you.
Я закончу сейчас. Последний.
Okay.
Республика Молдова призывает к прекращению войны на территории Украины и возвращению к диалогу. Я считаю, что в нынешней ситуации мы должны сплотиться и восстановить парламентскую дипломатию, чтобы способствовать созданию благоприятных условий для политического переговорного процесса в целях скорейшего регулирования конфликта и прекращения кровопролития на Украине. Скажем дружно всеми депутатами нашей ассамблеи «нет войне». Спасибо за внимание.
Thank you, Mr. Vladimir Bolea. Next speaker on my list is head of the Belarusian delegation, Mr. Andrei Savini. He will be followed by Mr. Artur Gerasimov from Ukraine and the deputy chair of the second committee. Mr. Andrei Savini, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Благодарю вас, госпожа председатель. Уважаемые коллеги, мне, конечно, хотелось бы вспомнить замечательные слова, которые сказал сегодня генеральный секретарь Роберто Мантелло. Он сказал, что нам надо отказаться от предвзятости, говорить все как есть, сохранить реализм, прежде всего для того, чтобы без стыда смотреть в глаза будущим поколениям. Действительно прекрасные слова, но, к сожалению, пока я вижу очень мало следования вот именно этому совету. И в этой связи хотел бы напомнить вам, что на протяжении последних как минимум 10 лет Беларусь постоянно и настойчиво предупреждала об опасной эскалации военно-политической ситуации в регионе ОБСЕ, о деградации системы международного права, о деградации системы безопасности, об обесценивании международных договоров и соглашений. Мы выдвигали очень много заявлений по этому поводу, но нас не услышали, мы были проигнорированы. Также общеизвестно, что Россия неоднократно открыто призывала уважать интересы всех игроков, всех членов ОБСЕ в сфере безопасности. Российское руководство обращалось с предложениями о начале открытого диалога по вопросам безопасности к США и НАТО. Однако эти инициативы сразу получили ярлыки ультиматумов и также были проигнорированы. Это трагическое последствие, это трагический результат этих усилий. Все эти усилия реально задокументированы, и скрыть правду за эмоциональными заявлениями все равно не удастся. Я считаю, что жертвой вот этого безответственного поведения стран коллективного Запада стала не только Украина, но и вся система европейской и международной безопасности, которая выстраивалась поколениями. Но сегодня особую озабоченность у нас вызывает информация о существовании в Украине американских биологических лабораторий. Причем информация об этом мы имеем и от Комитета по международным отношениям Сената США, и Министерства обороны США. Я знаю, что эта информация во многом отрицается. Но если такая информация подтвердится, то это станет грубейшим нарушением со стороны США и Украины Конвенции о запрещении разработки, производства и накопления запасов бактериологического и токсинного оружия. Биологическое оружие не создается просто так. Оно предназначено для массового поражения людей и несет угрозу для всего человечества. В этой связи мы считаем крайне важным провести независимое расследование и устранить любые сомнения в том, есть эти факты или нет. А если они подтвердятся, то мы считаем крайне важным для парламентской ассамблеи ОБСЕ предпринять необходимые меры для того, чтобы остановить эту опасную деятельность. Благодарю за внимание.
Thank you, Mr. Andrei Savini. Speaker on my left, this is Mr. Arthur Gerasimov. Please turn off your noise immediately.
Not him. We don't know who it is.
Thank you.
So, thank you very much, Madam President, dear colleagues. Remember, many times before I talked how dangerous is the behavior of Russian Federation.
I didn't say it.
And I want you to understand, this is full-scale war. This is not conflict. This is not just invasion. This is full-scale war. With missile attack, with aviation, with bombing, 1,000 kilogram bombs to the civilians. Please understand that. Second point, I just listened to the speech of our colleagues from the Russian delegation, and some information about, written to me, biological and chemical laboratories in Ukraine. Sorry, guys. Immediately after the invasion, Russia told, we started this invasion, we started this war with purpose to free Ukrainian people. Remember it? After 100% Ukrainian people started to fight against aggressor, let me say 100%, 100%. They immediately changed their rhetorics. They told, we started this war because we wanted to prevent war from Ukraine. Ukraine is a peaceful country. And we proved it during all our existence, starting from the, when we provided out from Ukraine nuclear weapons, and finished by our behavior during the last years. So, and now, truly speaking, I see this again fakes about this chemical, biological laboratories. I'm an MP from Ukraine. And in the previous years, I was the member of the National Security and Defense Committee. This is fake. There are no Americans. And there are no American chemical and biological laboratories. I think this is the same fake like it was with to free Ukrainian people and to prevent attack on Russia. Next point. Unfortunately, the territory of Belarus is actively used by Russia for military purposes. And now we have sad news that Russian aircrafts, I think 1 or 2 hours ago, started their flight from the Russian or Belarusian airfields, went to the occupied airspace of Ukraine and made attack on Belarusian territory. Just one question. Do you think Ukraine is interested that the Russian army will start attack together with Russia? No. Russia is interested. Yes, Russia is very interested because they don't have enough forces. And they want now to put the Russian people into this war from 100%. And last but not least, humanitarian situation and nuclear threats. Please think about Chernobyl station, nuclear station, Zaporizhzhia nuclear station, about nuclear stations of Ukraine, because Russia is really, according to information, is ready to prepare provocations in that areas. And humanitarian situation is very, very sad. Millions of people moved. Millions of people now suffered from no food, from no water, from no electricity. For example, in many cities now, Russia organized genocide. For example, in Mariupol, they made a circle. They are not allowing people to go out. And they are bombing hospitals, they are bombing kindergartens, they are bombing civilian houses. Truly speaking, to finish, I want to finish just with one phrase. If Europe does not want to fight on its own territory, please help now Ukrainians to stop aggressor. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Artur Gerasimov, and wish Ukraine peace and respect for its territorium and integrity. Next speaker on my list is head of the Icelandic delegation, Ms. Bryndís Haraldsdóttir. She will be followed by head of Estonian delegation, Mr. Matti Raidma. Ms. Bryndís Haraldsdóttir, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Madam President, I am a 45-year-old Icelandic MP, a wife and a mother of 3. I will be able to hug my family tonight. Dear Ukrainian colleagues, I feel for you, both as a colleague, but also as a person. A human being that believes in peace, freedom, international law, and democracy. I never expected to witness a war in Europe, a war as we now see in Ukraine. Fighting pandemic, yes. Fighting and adjusting to global warming, yes. Cybersecurity and natural disasters, yes. Maybe drone strikes on military installation, but attacks on civilians, children being killed, war crimes. I do not have word for this disaster. And to be honest, I do not understand how this can happen in the year 2022. Iceland is a small nation with no army, but we are a NATO member with a defense agreement with the United States. Even though Iceland cannot supply arms, we can stand in solidarity with Ukraine. I join the Icelandic government in condemning the Russian government's action and requesting that the Russian forces be withdrawn immediately. This invasion represents a fundamental changes of our security architecture and forces us to reassess our security. Iceland, maybe more than many countries, owes its security to the respect of international law. We must continue to work towards the universal respect for democracy and fundamental freedoms. I applaud the neighboring countries of Ukraine for welcoming refugees, and we in Iceland will of course open our arms for Ukrainian refugees. In light of the fact that Russia's invasion is in a violation of the Helsinki Final Act, the basis for our organization, has there been any discussion in the OSCE on suspending Russian participation in our assembly? Is that a possibility? My thoughts are with the Ukrainian people, and I hope that this war ends immediately and negotiation can begin in the earnest. Glory to Ukraine. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Ms. Bryndís Haraldsdóttir. Next speaker on my list is Mr. Matti Raidma, head of the Estonian delegation. He will be followed by head of the Italian delegation, Mr. Paolo Grimoldi. Mr. Matti Raidma, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable President, dear colleagues. First, my deepest condolences to the Ukrainian people, those who have bravely fought for their country and have lost their lives. It has been more than 2 weeks since aggressor Putin started invasion against peaceful democratic Ukraine. None of us accepting our members from Russia, couldn't imagine how brutal and inhuman the Russian aggression in Ukraine was planned when we had our winter meeting. Today's Kremlin words, military operation and liberation, are the biggest lie what 21st century Europe has heard since World War II. It is inhuman how millions of people have left their home, what's supposed to be the safest place to be. It is brutal how aggressor promises humanitarian corridors, but keeps bombing innocent people. Action speaks louder than words. Ukrainian people are showing striking bravery. They are fighting for their lives, for their country. Estonia is helping Ukraine in every possible way. Attack on democratic, peaceful country is an attack on all free democratic countries who share the same values. It is an attack also against OSCE. I'm very disappointed that our OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, a platform focused on security and cooperation, has not been able to adopt any official position statement or resolution in the middle of real war for weeks. Do you really understand how we can protect our values? Through the opportunity to express your feelings within 3 minutes? So far, I have not been convinced that the aggressor Russia has ambition to end this war. Quite the opposite. It is our duty to protect Helsinki Final Act and call out if someone goes against everything OSCE stands for. I strongly believe that Russia should be suspended from participation. We all are and will stay behind Ukraine. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Matti Raidma. Next speaker is head of the Italian delegation, Mr. Paolo Grimoldi. He will be followed by head of the Lithuanian delegation, Ms. Vilja Alkinati Abramikiene. Mr. Paolo Grimoldi, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thanks to you, Madam President. First of all, thanks also to all of you to be here talking for a diplomatic solution and working for it. Let me underline something new by what I heard until now, that the Italian delegation made by 3 deputies, me, more 2 other deputies of different political party, were able to visit Poland in a few days ago. So thank you very much to the Italian Parliament to approve the possibility for the Italian OSCE delegation to go there immediately. And thank you very much to Mr. Potulayev, because he helped us, he met us, and we talked about solutions. We had several meetings with Polish institutions, Polish border guards, Polish police and security, and we were able to visit the border of Medica, where it's happening a real drama, because there is something that is not, I'm not able to describe by words, but it's important to go to visit to understand what is happening. A huge line with kids, with old persons, mothers, unbelievable cold. And I want to underline that Poland is doing something unbelievable. They took already 1 million, 1.5 million of refugees. They are doing a great job. And sorry, why European Union choose it exactly the last hours to give sanctions to Poland and Hungary, that are 2 countries that they are doing more than everybody in this moment helping for Ukrainian refugees. Let me say that at least they didn't choose the best moment to give sanctions to Poland and Hungary. By the way, it was useful to understand what is very urgent to do. And talking with Mr. Putulayev, I think that it's very urgent to arrange, to build, to create an organism to taking care of all the millions of refugees that they are already arrived and they will arrive in Europe. I'm not talking about something inside the European Union, but something bigger, maybe exactly using OEC, because, for example, Switzerland or Norway or some countries outside European Union are interested to help too. And so I suggest to have as head of this organism to coordinate the help to the refugees, exactly Poland, because to them is the biggest thank you for what they are doing in this moment. And we cannot waste time. So we have to run because unfortunately the people is suffering exactly right now. And we cannot go on to talk for too long because we don't have time. And we have to arrange immediately the help by different countries. Thank you very much, Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. Paolo Grimaldi. Next speaker is Ms. Vilja Alkinate Abraminkiene. She will be followed by head of the delegation from United Kingdom, John Whittingdale. Ms. Vilja Alkinate Abraminkiene, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. Our Secretary General Roberto Montella has started his address with an apology. From my perspective, many European politicians today should apologize for continuing business as usual after every time Russia broke the norms of international law. European and world politicians continued the dialogue in the knowledge that Russia was openly lying to them. But appeasing policy did not help to prevent war. Secretary General offered a dialogue. I will support the dialogue when Russia stops the war in Ukraine and withdraws all the troops. Dialogue in a form of ultimatum is not a dialogue at all. What we see now, brutal military aggression. Every day, Russian army commits numerous terrible crimes against civilians, even against vulnerable Ukrainian mothers and their babies. Murder of civilians is a crime against humanity. And the actions of Russia are acquiring features characteristic to genocide. Responsibility for crimes happening in Ukraine also fall on Belarusian regime, because it has allowed to use its territory for attacks on an independent neighbor country. At the same time, Russian society is being more and more harshly oppressed. Independent journalism is dead. Draconian laws threaten people who dare to call war a war. Protesters against the war, even children, are being put behind bars. Up until now, Putin's regime has been called authoritarian. But now Russia is acquiring traits of a totalitarian state. For these reasons, the Lithuanian delegation at the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly proposes to suspend the voting rights of the Russian delegation until the real dialogue with its government becomes possible. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Ms. Vilja Alkinate Abraminkiene. Next speaker on my list is head of the United Kingdom delegation, Mr. John Whittingdale. He will be followed by Vice President Senator Roger Wicker from United States. Mr. John Whittingdale, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President.
Could I start by saying it was a pleasure to welcome you and the Secretary General to London last week. The Secretary General apologized for the fact that he felt he had been misled by Mr. Lavrov and had not taken seriously the warnings of the imminence of a Russian invasion. I too listened to the Russian ambassador in London about 2 weeks ago when he told me that there was no possibility of Russia wishing to invade Ukraine. Russia has consistently lied to us. I was in Mariupol 3 years ago, and I now see the bodies of the civilians lying in the streets of Mariupol and the bombing of a hospital, which Mr. Lavrov still says contained no civilians, despite the obvious evidence that it was the case. We were proud in Westminster last week to listen to President Zelensky deliver an address to the whole of the UK Parliament, and we stood to applaud him for his courage and the courage that Ukrainian citizens are showing. Our colleagues in the Parliamentary Assembly for the Council of Europe have decided to suspend Russia from membership. And I have to say, having seen the statement issued by Mr. Tolstoy afterwards, that seemed to me an entirely correct decision. Several of our colleagues here have said we should suspend Russia from the OSCE. My understanding is that it is not something that the Parliamentary Assembly can do. It would be for member states to take that decision. So if Russia is still members, then we will use it to have dialogue and to get across to them our absolute revulsion at the behavior of Russia that is taking place in Ukraine today. However, we will also take action against them, and the UK had already sanctioned 14 members of the Duma, and today has announced the sanctioning of another 386 members of the Duma. This will mean that they will not be able to travel and that their assets will be frozen. And to the leader of the US delegation, I would just say that we have also sanctioned Mr. Abramovich, who has now said that he will have to sell Chelsea Football Club, but he will not receive any of the proceeds if he does so. I look forward to welcoming colleagues to Birmingham in July. I pray that this situation will be resolved before then. It is a terrifying thought if it could go on that long. But in the meantime, we will continue to supply weapons to Ukraine, we will supply humanitarian aid to Ukraine, and the British people will welcome refugees from Ukraine. I fear this is going to go on for some time, and the OSCE does have a vitally important role to play. And I look forward to continuing our dialogue over the coming weeks and in Birmingham in July. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. John Whittingale. And thank you very much for your hospitality during the visit to London this week. And I do also thank you for the possibility to watch the message from President Zelensky in the House of Commons. And all of us look forward for the annual session in Birmingham this summer. Thank you very much for hosting it. Next speaker on my list is Vice President Senator Roger Wicker from United States. He will be followed by Head of the Netherlands Delegation, Ms. Farah Karimi. Senator Roger Wicker, the floor is yours.
Madam President, thank you all. Yes, United Kingdom. I too look forward to being in Birmingham this summer and having a full London news that have been. I was glad to hear the president in her opening remarks, the contacts she had made during the last weeks, outrageous war, contacts with criminal. I commend you for at that, and you across the news that the Vice President of the United States, Vice President Kamala Harris, in Bucharest, has just explicitly called the actions of Vladimir Putin and his war crimes. The only acceptable dialogue, I will agree with Vilia Alkanate Abramakiene, is a dialogue to a ceasefire to a total surrender by the Russian Federation of every inch of territory gained through visitation of war, not only upon Ukraine, but also in Moldova and Georgia and elsewhere. The result of this can be a return of everything accomplished by Russia. Prison for the war criminal, Putin, and the Russians, which I've of course advocated before. Assembly, I want to take a moment. If Russian citizens are able to listen to this dialogue, the 13,000 Russians who've been arrested by their leaders for exercise blood, the millions of voices are now being held captive illegally by their government, threatened by the world. The world stands with you. There will be a day for a new birth of freedom. That go. Thank you. Courage to our friends and such.
Thank you, Senator Roger Wicker. Next speaker is head of the Netherlands delegation, Ms. Farah Karimi. She will be followed by the head of the Georgian delegation, Mr. Nicholas Samkaradze. Ms. Farah Karimi, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to address the Russian delegation directly. 2 weeks passed since you, Mr. Tolstoy, sat there, echoed the words of Mr. Putin and defended his war. 2 weeks passed and we witnessed day by day killings of innocent people in Ukraine, war crimes and atrocities against civilians. Millions, women and children are forced to leave their home and seek refuge elsewhere. We have seen war crimes under order of Mr. Putin in Grozny, in Aleppo, and now we see it in Mariupol. The International Committee of the Red Cross warns of dire situation, humanitarian situation there. Food and water supplies in besieged and bombed Mariupol are running dangerously low. Mr. Tolstoy, I honestly wonder, how do you answer Russian mothers who thought their sons were just taking part in a military exercise and now see their sons engaged in a war against the neighbors? How can you explain to them they were lied to by Mr. Putin, like the whole world was lied to by him? How do you look at the eyes of the Russian people who are now suffering from the consequences of the sanctions that are hitting the Russian economy badly? You are so afraid of Russian people knowing the truth that you passed a law to punish journalists and people who report and tell the truth about the brutal violence against innocent people. You arrest thousands of people protesting against war. Even the survivor of the Leningrad siege of Second World War, Yelena Osipova, was arrested. Is this the great future Mr. Putin is envisaging for the people of Ukraine? Mr. Tolstoy, let me tell you one thing. We are taking the Ukrainians fleeing your war in our homes. We are sharing bread and butter with them. Their sorrow, their anger, and their fear is ours now. For how long do you think the political leaders in Washington, Brussels, and London can resist the outrage and anger of their own population? Our people are asking for actions, firmer actions, even military ones against Russia. How many bombshells on hospitals and schools, on civilians while trying to evacuate, on houses, squares, and churches do you think it will take until stronger support to the people of Ukraine becomes inevitable? What could possibly justify pushing the Russian and Ukrainian people, the European people, and the world population to the edge of the next world war? What could possibly justify the pain, misery, and grave losses of millions of people? What could possibly justify you and your colleagues to stand with Mr. Putin on the wrong side of history? What, Mr. Tolstoy? Stop this madness.
Thank you, Ms. Farah Karimi. Next speaker on my list is head of the Georgian delegation, Mr. Nicolas Samkaradze. He will be followed by the Portuguese head of delegation, Mr. Luis Graça. Mr. Nicolas Samkaradze, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. We are, of course, deeply concerned about the ongoing Russian aggression in Ukraine, which is taking hundreds of lives of innocent citizens every day and is violating all the principles of international law. We, of course, strongly condemn Russian aggression and also Russia's so-called legalistic approach, legalistic, of course, in brackets, on recognition of the puppet regimes in Donetsk and Lugansk, and military invasion of a sovereign state and use of force to redraw the map of independent Ukraine represents serious threat to the security of the of not only the Black Sea region anymore, but of the whole world. Georgia, of course, stands in solidarity with the Ukrainian people, with the Ukrainian nation, and fully supports Ukraine's territorial integrity and sovereignty. We continue consistent support of Ukraine at all international fora, which is clearly demonstrated by the recent steps of our government, including co-sponsoring the UN Security Council resolution, also voting in favor of the decision of the Council of Europe Committee of Ministers to suspend Russia from its representation in the Council of Europe. And also we, based on referral of 39 countries, including Georgia, the International Criminal Court prosecutor announced an opening of an investigation into war crimes in Ukraine. I have to share news with you today that International Criminal Court now issued an arrest warrant for 3 de facto South Ossetian officials for the war crimes that they have committed in 2008. And I have to express hope and also tell to our Ukrainian colleagues that justice might be slow in making, but justice will always prevail, and today's decision of the ICC to prosecute the officials for the 2008 war that took place 14 years ago shows and demonstrates that justice will always prevail. You know, the war in Ukraine is a repetition of the scenario that led to occupation of 20% of my country, and taking into consideration Russia's illegal military buildup and intensified military exercises in our occupied regions, Georgia's territorial integrity and sovereignty are also challenged. And sooner or later, there is a possibility that Georgia again might face the risk of a repeated full-scale Russian invasion. So Georgia, like no other nation, can feel the pain of Ukrainians and stands in solidarity with them. And I call on international community to act, to take its act to resolve and stop this insanity now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Nicolas Samkaradze. Next speaker on my list is head of the Portuguese delegation, Mr. Luis Graça. He will be followed by the head of the Latvia delegation, Mr. Juris Puce. Mr. Luis Graça, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. I would like to congratulate you, President Margareta Sederfeld, and the Secretary Roberto Montella for this meeting and the announced OSCE initiative for the Polish-Ukraine border, and say that I really believe that we could have gone a little bit further and tried to meet in Lviv with members of the Ukrainian parliament, taking advantage of the fact that the majority of the media around the world have correspondents in this city in the north of Ukraine. Dear colleagues, few of us believed before our meeting in Vienna that this war will be possible. Perhaps because this war is not rational and have no rational proposals or basis. Since 24th of February, governments around the world have approved multiple measures of direct support to Ukraine, including military support and applied sanctions to the Russian Federation. But if governments have the diplomatic and executive initiative, parliaments are the expression of the people's will. We build bridges between citizens. Mobilizing public opinion around the world is the best way to put an end to this war and stop the death of innocent people in Ukraine. The first urgency is stop the war and respond to the humanitarian needs. But there is a question that we must begin to ask, and that is, when can we start to reconfigure a new and lasting peace plan for all Europe? Because the one we have with Russia since the Second World War is unfortunately dead. Perhaps President Putin and the Russian Federation is not yet available to respond to peace talks because they need to first understand they will never win this war. The free world will never accept that the strong of the law is replaced by the law of the strongest. But the European people, including I, believe the Russian people want to stop this illegal war and reestablish the foundations of a new manifesto for peace in Europe. For this, the OSCE and parliaments can and should play a role in promoting dialogue. That's why I find this OSCE delegation's visit to the Polish border very useful. I wish you can still go to Lviv. Tolstoy wrote at the end of his War and Peace, man's freedom is distinguished from every other force because it is recognized by our conscience. We need to talk to the conscience of the citizens and mobilize the free world for peace. I would like, Madam President, to end with a word of total condemnation of the Russian invasion and a word of strength and solidarity with the people of Ukraine. You are not alone. In Portugal, as in the whole world, the people have raised their voices condemning Russian and this illegal war and demanding peace. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. Luis Garcia. Next speaker is the head of the Latvian delegation, Mr. Juris Buce. He will be followed by Ms. Kari Henriksen, Special Representative of South Caucasus from Norway. Mr. Juris Buce, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, first of all, I would like to thank you for calling this meeting. This is incredibly important that we meet and discuss what is happening in Ukraine. Second, I am personally very glad that we have an opportunity to see our colleague, Nikita Poturyaev. And also I have opportunity to extend message of support to you personally, Nikita, to your country, to your nation. Putin's Russia has invaded another country. It has created disaster. Lives of thousands already have been lost. Aggressor has no remorse. Its representatives continue to tell unspeakable lies. During these 2 weeks, we have heard unbelievable falsehoods. But do we feel surprised? Not a single moment. Already 8 years ago, the whole world was forced to listen to lies that Boeing of Malaysian Airlines was shot by Ukrainians, then by some mysterious other airplanes, etc. and etc. It continues and continues. Dear friends, Ukraine fights for all of us, those who live in free and democratic world. We have shown support to Ukraine, but it is not enough. While Ukraine is fighting, we still continue paying millions every single day to Russian state for energy resources that it uses to finance war, to buy those bombs that destroyed maternity center, to buy those Grad missiles that hit Kharkiv and Mariupol while we are speaking. We, the West, must end this now. Yes, our energy bills will be higher, but we will pay only with money. Ukrainians pay with their lives. and how we will react. We, Parliamentary Assembly, we will continue listening to Russian and Belarusian delegates, how Iskandar's search for Nazis and drug addicts in maternity ward. I would support suspending rights of Russian so-called parliamentarians to participate in Parliamentary Assembly meetings as long as the war continues. The war must stop. Slava Ukraini.
Thank you, Mr. Juris Puse. Next speaker is Special Representative on South Caucasus, Ms. Kari Henriksen from Norway. She will be followed by Vice President Pia Kauma from Finland. Ms. Kari Henriksen, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. President, and thank you and the Secretary General for arranging this meeting. It was a very good timing for that kind of action. Let me be clear, there are no excuse and there are no legal reason for Russia's war in Ukraine. We strongly commend the continued and massive Russian aggression. We have full solidarity with Ukraine and the Ukrainian people. Ukraine has our unwavering support for its sovereignty and territorial integrity within its international recognized borders. We urge the Russian Federation to immediately withdraw its forces from Ukraine's internationally recognized borders and cease all threats and military actions. International laws, including humanitarian law and human rights law, the Geneva Convention, must be respected, not least in the midst of war. And dear friends, we have been in this situation before. The people's suffering in Europe after the Second World War was the seed that made OSCE grow. This seed is our commitment to nourish and to help vivid in the future. Russia will not disappear. The Russian people will also suffer, as we have learned from many incidents in the OSCE PA the last years. Dialogue may have failed in preventing war, but to my knowledge, no war has ended without dialogue. I think the paper that the General Secretary has sent us is a good basic for further work in the OSCE PA. I support the field missions. I support that we have continued dialogue, and I support that we must stay together in the international responses. Norway is fully supporting all European sanctions, and I think it's urgent for us in the PA to make sure that our governments stand by its international obligations to make sure that this war ends as soon as possible, so that the suffering that our colleague and friends from Ukrainian have taught us about can end. Thank you, and thank you to the Ukrainian people for their fight.
Thank you, Ms. Kari Henriksen. Next speaker is Vice President Pia Kauma from Finland. She will be followed by Special Representative on Elderly, Ms. Paola Taverna from Italy. Ms. Pia Kauma, the floor is yours.
Dear Madam President, members of the Standing Committee, dear colleagues, let me start by expressing my deepest regrets for all the unnecessary lives lost in the Russian war against Ukraine. I also want to express my strongest support and admiration to all Ukrainians for your tireless efforts and determination to defend your freedom, your democracy, and your independence. We were all shocked by this war, but if we go back in history, was it really a surprise? For more than a decade, Russia has been very consistent. It has committed aggressive acts towards OSCE participating states in South Ossetia, Abkhazia, and Crimea, and it has adopted legislation to restrict freedoms of speech assembly and media. It has shrunk the space for civil society. It has been involved in attempts to disrupt elections in several countries, and it has consistently used its veto to halt the development of our organization. All of this was leading up to the attack on Ukraine. The mask has been removed, so to speak, and now we see that it was all part of Russia's greater plan. Dear colleagues, like Secretary General Montella underlined in his speech, the OSCE is an organization for dialogue, for upholding peace and security through joint commitments and understanding. The OSCE cannot impose sanctions, but we can initiate confidence building and de-escalation measures, as well as offer a platform for dialogue and negotiations. Dialogue must not end, not even when it seems impossible. But at all times, mutually accepted principles and agreements have to be respected. Like Vilja Aleknaite and some others very clearly pointed out, dialogue cannot be held with a gun pointed at your head. Dear colleagues, from your interventions today and earlier, I have felt frustration how little there is that we can really do as an organization at the moment in order to end the war or to have a ceasefire or even to help civilians who still are in Ukraine. Last year, the Helsinki Plus 50 call for action process was launched with the aim to discuss ways to improve our working methods and to increase the efficiency and relevance of our organization ahead of our 50th anniversary in 2025. What started off in an impressive event has since lost a bit of its momentum, and we need to critically assess progress and needed developments to get back on track. The Helsinki Plus 50 process is important, but we need to make it more concrete. At our winter meeting, I expressed the readiness of Finland to host a Helsinki Plus 50 meeting in the autumn of this year. We have discussed preliminary plans with President Söderfeldt, Secretary General Montella, and Ambassador Zanier. I would now like to take this process forward. The Finnish delegation will let you know how we'll proceed and what will be the topics on the agenda for our evaluation as soon as we have it ready to be discussed. In my view, the main aim for the Helsinki Plus 50 process should be for us to agree on a roadmap for things that we as parliamentarians and as an organization commit to achieving by 2025, when we have the 50th anniversary of our organization's founding conference in Helsinki. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice President Pia Kauma. Next speaker is Special Representative on Elderly, Ms. Paola Taverna from Italy. She will be followed by member of the Turkish delegation, Mr. Ahmet Arslan. Ms. Paola Taverna, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Buongiorno a tutti. Io inizio con il ringraziare la Presidente Söderfeldt e il Segretario Generale Montella per questa occasione di incontro così importante data la drammaticità degli eventi in corso. Quanto sta accadendo in Ucraina è atroce e ingiustificabile. Io ci tengo a sottolineare con forza che l'invasione da parte della Russia non rappresenta una minaccia soltanto nei confronti dell'Ucraina, è un vero e proprio attacco frontale alla nostra concezione dei rapporti tra stati basati sulle regole e sui diritti. Non è esagerato pensare che come risponderemo o non risponderemo a questa follia determinerà il futuro dell'Europa. Dato il mio ruolo di rappresentante speciale per gli anziani, mi preme portare la vostra attenzione su questa categoria di persone. Sta avvenendo una tragedia nella tragedia, una strage dei più vulnerabili, proprio gli anziani. Non è semplice raccogliere dati, ma ogni giorno arrivano immagini e video terribili. Si parla già di più di 1 milione di anziani solamente nell'est dell'Ucraina a rischio estremo. Sono crudeltà inaudite e inaccettabili. Davvero sconvolge la violenza contro obiettivi civili che non hanno alcuna valenza di natura militare. Bisogna fare ogni sforzo per un immediato cessate il fuoco e la realizzazione di corridoi umanitari veri, efficaci ed effettivi. Per quanto mi riguarda, il mio Paese, assicuro la più totale e piena disponibilità per lavorare insieme allo scopo di fermare la guerra con tutti i mezzi a nostra disposizione. Rinnovo il ringraziamento alla Presidente per aver dato questo momento di riflessione quanto mai utile per continuare a riflettere insieme sulle soluzioni da portare a questo tragico conflitto. Grazie.
Thank you, Ms. Paula Taverna. Next speaker is Mr. Ahmed from Turkey. He will be followed by Deputy Chair of the First Committee, Mr. Kostel Dunava from Romania. And now I give the floor to Mr. Ahmed Arslan. The floor is yours. Thank
Söz
you.
alacak Sayın Ahmet Arslan, söz sizde. Buyurun. Madam President, distinguished colleagues, first of all, I would like to thank you very much for giving us this opportunity, and I'm here representing the head of the Turkish delegation, Mr. Selami Altınok, who is currently participating in the Antalya Diplomacy Forum. Therefore, I also convey his regrets for not being able to be here. I also would like to thank for the message given to Turkey about the civilians under risk in a mosque under heavy bombardment. I would like to assure you that the necessary message has been taken to the President and also the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Turkey. We also stand in solidarity with Ukraine and the territorial integrity and the humanitarian rights that are being violated within the borders of Ukraine right now is being violated. We stand with Ukraine. They must be respected. Turkish Airlines had 2 charter flights from Sochi Airways, and we have evacuated 141 citizens so far. So we very much believe and have witnessed on the ground that we need ceasefire and we need a stop to this aggression, to this war as soon as possible. We are also in contact with the Russians. We try to use the dialogue and diplomacy to convince them to stop the war. We try to withdraw them back to the dialogue. We want to see the way to ceasefire and peace is open as soon as possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Ahmed Arslan. Next speaker is Deputy Chair of the First Committee, Mr. Costel Dunava from Romania. He will be followed by Vice President Christian Vigenin from Bulgaria. Mr. Costel Dunava, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. I am the Vice Chair of the First Committee. Mr. Hasan is the Chair of the First Committee. He spoke before me. Dear colleagues, Romania reiterates its strongest condemnation of the continued unjustified and unprovoked military aggression by the Russian Federation against Ukraine, an independent and sovereign state. It is the worst military aggression Europe has witnessed in decades, a serious breach of international law, a serious and flagrant violation of the UN Charter and of all OSCE commitments. We repeat our call on the Russian Federation to immediately and unconditionally stop this aggression and withdraw all its military forces and equipment from the entire territory of Ukraine within its internationally recognized borders. Likewise, we condemn the use of the Belarusian territory for conducting this aggression, as we consider Belarus is playing an active role in this conflict together with Russia. We are also concerned for the Republic of Moldova, a country that received the highest number of refugees as proportionally compared to its population. The Republic of Moldova needs the support of the international community during these troubled times. Distinguished colleagues, the Parliament of Romania adopted on 28 February a declaration on the situation of Ukraine. The full text was notified on 1st of March on the President and the Secretary General of our Assembly. Romania supports the substantial response measures imposed to the Russian Federation as a consequence of this deeply illegal act. Romania joined the group of 44 OSCE participating states to activate the OSCE Moscow mechanism in order to launch an expert fact-finding mission to assess the impact on human rights and the humanitarian situation caused by the Russian Federation's aggression on Ukraine, including potential crimes and crimes against humanity. Ukrainian and UN humanitarian agencies, the International Red Cross, medical personnel, and non-governmental assistance providers must be guaranteed safe, rapid, and unimpeded access to people in need throughout the territory of Ukraine within its internationally recognized borders immediately. Romania has sent humanitarian assistance to Ukraine worth over 3 million euros. We have also decided to establish on our territory a logistic hub to collect and transport donations of the international humanitarian assistance to Ukraine and its citizens. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Kostel-Dunava. Next speaker is Vice President Christian Vigenin from Bulgaria. He will be followed by the head of the Slovakian delegation, Mr. Peter Osuski. Vice President Christian Vigenin, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, President, dear colleagues. First, I must confess that I've never expected a full-scale war against Ukraine. But time comes when we should expect the unexpected, and it's time to end the wishful thinking and start preparing for the worst-case scenarios from now on. I'm not going to repeat what colleagues already said. We are almost all of us on the same line. I would like to say a few words about the OSCE PA role and our role as members of parliament. We cannot help much in stopping the war right now. It's the executive branch and governments that are better equipped to do that. I'm sure that our time will come, and it will come afterwards as soon as the military confrontation stops in Ukraine. But for now, but at this point, in a short term, even already now, we as members of parliament could do probably several things. First of all, raise the awareness among our voters about the war. Secondly, to push our governments to increase their efforts in support of Ukraine in all its aspects. Third, what is probably most important right now is to make sure that we accommodate in the best possible way the refugees fleeing the war. And here I would like to express my appreciations to the neighboring countries so far, especially Poland and Moldova. Here we would like, we need to push for mobilizing more funding, because the issue with the refugees will continue to be a huge challenge, especially for the neighboring countries. And probably one important element to start discussion already on the modalities to help rebuild Ukraine, including to make Russia pay for the destruction of the civil infrastructure of the country. More in a midterm projection, we could provide a platform for dialogue and discussion on the future security challenges, because the situation has changed, and I think has changed dramatically, and we need, and we could be such a platform as Parliamentary Assembly. And another element is that it seems to me that after the war in Ukraine, we are entering years of a new type of a Cold War, and OSCE and its Parliamentary Assembly is best suited to deal with such a challenge. That would be one of our important responsibilities. And of course, talking about the worst case scenarios that we should not exclude, we need as a Parliamentary Assembly to pay special attention to all the elements of the nuclear disarmament. I express again my full solidarity to Ukraine and its people. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice President Christian Vigenin. Next speaker is Peter Osuski, head of the Slovakian delegation. He will be followed by Mr. Oskar Mina, head of the San Marino delegation. Mr. Peter Osuski, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Dear Lady President, dear colleagues from parliaments, dear friends of democracy. We are, as it was stated by Roberto Montella at the beginning, institution of dialogue. But now there is more a time of fight. We should keep in mind the quotation of heroic President Zelensky, who stated, Ukraine need anti-tank ammunition and not a right for me, the president, to leave the country. Of course, there was no time of dialogue during the Battle of Britain between neither Sir Winston Churchill and Reichschancellor Adolf Hitler, nor between Ribbentrop and Eden. It was a time of fight. And what is our role, possibility, and duty in this time is to initiate and to press to our governments to do everything possible what our countries can do in support of Ukraine, economically, but also militarily. We should stop to discuss if the enemy, the empire of evil, will be angry about us if we support the heroic defense of Ukraine. There was at the beginning even a not clear position of many important countries towards SWIFT. Thanks God, it moved. It is now the time to do anything possible to support the military of Ukraine by equipment. To tell the truth, there is no time for appeasement. We saw yesterday in Antalya a set, I would say, performance of Lavrov, the Ribbentrop from Kremlin, who made a shameful presentation of lies, lies, and lies. That's why, in my opinion, we have to do all possible to avoid any type of appeasement with evil. Because of any reasons, economical, other, or so, we should clearly support Ukraine. We should help the Ukrainians. We are a small country, but per capita, we received many Ukrainian immigrants. And thanks God, also a 10-day-old girl was born in Slovakia as a hope for future Ukraine. Slava Ukraini!
Thank you, Mr. Peter Osuski. Next speaker is head of San Marino delegation, Mr. Oscar Mina. He will be followed by the head
Grazie
of the German
Presidente,
delegation, Mr.
intervengo anch'io cercando di portare il mio contributo e riprendendo un'affermazione importante che l'ex presidente ucraino Poroshenko ha messo in evidenza, il tema della disinformazione in questo conflitto che sta dilagando letteralmente. Nel mio ruolo di special rapporteur ho potuto constatare come sia in atto parallelamente anche una guerra dell'informazione e della propaganda a vari livelli. Le tensioni sono così elevate che purtroppo anche le notizie, vere o false, sono diventate veramente la parte integrante di questa guerra. Una disinformazione coordinata sotto il controllo della Russia verso l'Unione Europea e non solo, puntando in particolare a condizionare proprio l'opinione pubblica. Infatti in questo scenario gli organi di informazione sono inevitabilmente pro-autorità, prodigati a denigrare l'Ucraina, raffigurandola come una minaccia per la sicurezza globale, attaccando la comunità internazionale per il sostegno alla sovranità, all'integrità territoriale e all'indipendenza degli Stati, in conflitto all'interno dei propri confini riconosciuti a livello internazionale. Ho voluto mettere in evidenza questa riflessione perché credo che la disinformazione ne consegue anche una retorica propagandistica sempre più ostile e incendiaria che non fa altro che sminuire proprio la garanzia e la indivisibilità della sicurezza, nonché gli sforzi diplomatici volti a promuovere la pace e la stabilità. E a questo proposito vorrei richiamare l'atto finale di Helsinki, in particolare in alcuni titoli che tratteggiano, diciamo così, i principi, cioè l'eguaglianza sovrana, il rispetto dei diritti inerenti alla sovranità, il non ricorso alla minaccia o all'uso della forza, l'inviolabilità delle frontiere, l'integrità territoriale degli Stati, la risoluzione pacifica della controversia. Quindi, secondo il mio punto di vista, unirsi alla lotta con l'Ucraina significa sostenere questi principi fermamente in tutte le sedi opportune, per il rispetto delle libertà fondamentali e del diritto internazionale. Grazie, Presidente.
Thank you, Mr. Oscar Mina, not only head of the San Marino delegation, as well as special representative on disinformation. Thank you for raising the important issue. And next speaker on my list is the head of the German delegation, Mr. Robin Wagner. He will be followed by the head of the Irish delegation, Mr. Michael Cred. Mr. Robin Wagner, first of all, congratulations for your appointment as head of the German delegation, and mostly welcome to OSCE Parliamentary Assembly. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. Although it is such a bad situation to be in the first meeting of this assembly here, but thank you for welcoming me. Dear colleagues, this war is a cruel, inhumane and illegal aggression by the autocrat Putin with the help of dictator Lukashenko. And on behalf of the Bundestag, I would like to be very clear. Germany stands firm with our Ukrainian friends. We have common dreams, values, ideals, which are democracy, freedom and peace. There is no other cause for this war than the decisions of Vladimir Putin. He is responsible. And this war cannot be justified with any NATO, Ukrainian or any other decisions. And it is not a war of the Russian and Belarusian people, because they are also forced in a war by their repressive regimes. This war began in 2014. There was no NATO Maidan, there was a Euro Maidan. This war was started when the free people of Ukraine stood up for democracy, for freedom and a course towards the European Union. Putin's war is a war against Ukraine, but it is also a war against our common peace and security order in Europe. It is a war against a system for peace represented by this assembly. And we urge the Russian regime to return to international law, to peace and cooperation. As German Bundestag, we urged our government to work hard with our partners for a ceasefire and withdrawal of invading troops. We urged our government to support the free and sovereign Ukraine with political, economical, financial and humanitarian aid, and also constantly to look for more military equipment and further sanctions. We urged our government to stand up for prosecution of war crimes. We urged our government for solidarity with our partners in Middle and Eastern Europe and European solidarities with refugees. And personally, not only as chair of the German delegation, but also as the chair of German-Ukrainian Friendship Group in German Parliament, let us all stand up with Ukraine in their fight for their country and in their fight for our freedom. And I appeal to the delegates from Russia and Belarus especially, also after what we heard today, please return to truth, return to international law, and to cooperation and peace instead of war and crime. And to us as the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, maybe that we cannot do much at this moment, but we can keep up the spirit of peace and security in Europe. We can draw the necessary conclusions from this breach of the current framework, and we can work towards an adapted and new order of peace and security in our region of the world. Thank you.
Mr. Robin Wagner. Next speaker is head of the Irish delegation, Mr. Michael Cred. He will be followed by Special Representative on Civil Society, Mr. Kyriakos Hadiani from Cyprus. Mr. Michael Cred, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam President, parliamentary colleagues and friends. Thank you for convening this meeting. The question is, what now for the OSCE, as we are the collective guardians of the principles of international law, the Helsinki principles, and the rule of law. And for that reason, I think this war in Ukraine, this illegal breach of international law by Russia, is a challenge to our core objectives, our raison d'etre. And for that reason, I thank you, Madam President, for organizing today's meeting and also for the initiatives which the OSCE has been taking, and in particular, the planned visit to Poland. I concur, in fact, with my Portuguese colleague that perhaps We may have been somewhat bolder, that we may have crossed the border, we may have visited Ukraine. I think the symbolism of these acts is really important, but I do accept the judgment of you, Madam President, and your executive colleagues there in leading the organization. But symbolism is hugely important because we are the voice, not of government, but we are the voice of the peoples across all member states. And I think it is clear that we speak as one voice. We speak as one voice in condemnation of the illegal invasion of the Ukraine. And we salute our Ukrainian colleagues, their bravery, their resistance, and we assure them that we will do as parliamentarians everything humanly possible to ensure that this illegal invasion is brought to an end as quickly as possible. It is ironic that the consequence of this invasion has in fact to see Europe more united than at any time in the previous past. And I think that is hugely important. I want to acknowledge in particular the role played by Ukraine's neighbors, our friends in Poland, Moldova, Romania, Slovakia in particular. I think their humanitarian response is an example and an inspiration to all of us. And I want to assure them that the Irish people and the Irish Parliament and the Irish government will not be found wanting also. But as parliamentarians, I commit also to ensuring that our government will be in the vanguard of placing the maximum pressure on governments collectively to increase the pressure on the Ukraine. Or on Russia. I want to say in conclusion to Russia, stop this war. Listen to the people of Russia. Withdraw from the Ukraine. Respect the integrity of Ukrainian borders. Give the Russian people access to the real information. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Michael Krehl. Next speaker is Special Representative Mr. Kyriakos Hadiani from Cyprus. He will be followed by Ms. Yara Sachs from Canada. Mr. Kyriakos Hadiani, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President, and congratulate for this excellent meeting today. The victim of this war is the international law. It remains on paper, unfortunately, without any hope for its implementation. The international security system, built after the World War II, has been put in the freezer. This war has already killed many lives. It has displaced millions of people, has abused millions of people, has led to thousands of missing persons. Economic and social catastrophe has been created already. The dramatic situation that prevails in the population should mobilize us, need any form of help, financial, food, psychological, medicine, medical, both for the people who have been evicted from the homes, from their homes, and for the people who are trapped in the cities and are under the threat of death. The common man, the human being should be respected. Human moments in frost conditions, without the basic infrastructure, without electricity, without medicine, medical infrastructure, compose the human drama in Ukraine. The need for all of us to demand a ceasefire here and now, immediately, is imperative. The dialogue must open immediately. In this campaign, we MPs must take the lead and stand by the displaced person or the displaced people. As special representative for civil society, I plan to visit Moldova and Romania and support the NGOs working in the area and support the humanitarian work. As the fastest growing humanitarian crisis since World War II is unfortunate humanitarian corridors must be guaranteed by international forces and be respected. Government authorities, EU agencies, as well as NGOs and citizens in neighboring countries are exerting every effort in addressing the needs of huge numbers of Ukrainians that flee war, and they must be further supported in this effort. It is particularly urgent to support unaccompanied children who cross borders, as the risk of trafficking also soars in emergencies. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. Kyriakis Hadjiani. And now I will give the floor to the last speaker on my list, Ms. Yara Sachs from Canada. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to all of our delegates here today in what is truly an important moment for us to stand together as the OSCE and 57 nation states supporting Ukraine. Since our standing committee met 2 weeks ago, Russia's illegal and unprovoked war has inflicted immense hardship on the Ukrainian people. While Russia has claimed its assault is aimed only at military targets, the facts tell an entirely different story, as witnessed at the recent attacking of the maternity hospital in Mariupol. The UN Human Rights Office has reported at least 1,424 civilian casualties since the beginning of the war, a number that is unacceptable in any circumstances and includes the lives of dozens of children lost. Given the limited data available, the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights has said that she believes the true casualty figures are much higher. Russia's invasion has destroyed homes and critical infrastructure and created a fuel, food, and water crisis. Before the war, the UN estimated that nearly 3 million people required humanitarian assistance in eastern Ukraine. The projections now estimate that 12 million people will require humanitarian aid nationwide. We must stand together. Russia's brutal attacks have caused more than 2.3 million people to flee the country in what has become the fastest growing refugee crisis in Europe since the Second World War. On behalf of the Canadian delegation, let me extend my gratitude to all of our European partners and allies who have so generously welcomed these refugees during this time of crisis. Your work is applauded, and we are here to assist every way we can. Russia's invasion of Ukraine violates international law. Let us be clear. The UN Charter and the country's OSCE obligations have been violated. This war is a threat to democracies everywhere and to the rules-based international order. In coordination with our allies, Canada has announced multiple rounds of sanctions on Russia and in response to this invasion, and we will continue to use every tool we have to suffocate the Russian regime. We've continued to be a strong voice in the collaborative commitment to intense pressure on the Russian regime to end this horrific aggression. We have also referred to the situation in Ukraine to the International Criminal Court over allegations that Russian forces have committed serious international crimes in Ukraine, including war crimes and crimes against humanity. Canada recently committed $100 million in humanitarian assistance for Ukraine in response to the UN's appeals. We will do everything we can. The Ukrainian people have shown incredible courage, resilience, and strength in the face of Russia's attacks these past 2 weeks. Canadians and Canada stand alongside you. I'd like to commend the immense bravery of those Russians who have stood up to Russian disinformation in this war. Together with the OSCE community, we must do everything in our power to support the people of Ukraine and to hold Russia accountable. Our constituents, our countries, and our allies demand it of us. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Ms. Yara Sachs. And now I will give the floor to Mr. Mikita Potorayev for a final word, and the speakers list is closed. Mr. Mikita Potorayev, the floor is yours.
Dear colleagues, I would just wanted to share with you the latest news that I've had from Ukrainian internet. Nestle Group announced that they are going to leave Russian market, but making an exception for essential goods. Ask yourself, my dear friends, do people in Mariupol now can get essential goods, people in Kharkiv or people in Chernihiv? Again, my friends, my colleagues, ask your governments, stop any cooperation with Russia. Russia and its citizens have collective responsibility for what is happening now in Ukraine. please stop any forms of cooperation. Of course, we in Ukraine will boycott all goods produced by international and Western corporations, which still are going to deal with Nazi Russia regime, and with Western banks, European banks, which still are going to deal with Nazi Russia regime, and will ask people all over the world to support this boycott. But please, colleagues, also become part of this process. Call to your governments. It's absolutely immoral to have any cooperation now with this regime. They all are responsible. Thank you very much. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Mikita Potorayev. And by this, I close point number 4, the open debate. And number 5, conclusion. I would first like to say thank you once again for our speakers. To Mr. Petro Poroshenko, former president of Ukraine, to a member of the Ukrainian parliament, Ms. Yevgenia Kravchuk, and to Mr. Ambassador Chimbialyuk, who spoke on behalf of Foreign Minister, Mr. Kuleba. Thank you very much for your interventions. And also thank you, dear colleagues, for all your speech. I do also say thank you to Secretary General for the draft of the action plan. And thank you to the Secretariat for making this meeting possible. When it comes to conclusion, I would like to say that it's really heartbreaking to hear that we are united, or everybody who has spoke here except Belarus agree. And we have the same opinion that it's important for us as a parliamentary assembly and parliamentarians to continue to act for peace in Ukraine, for a stop on the war crime, for stop of the illegal aggression performed by Russia. And also what I noticed is importance to raise awareness in our constituency, in our parliament, put pressure of our government to increase support for Ukraine, but also remember the humanitarian perspective with the refugees, how we can act to support Ukrainian refugees, and of course also remember the OSCE commitments that was done during the Cold War. And in this, think about the wider security perspective, the European security order, and of course, most of all, on the Ukraine and also its neighbor countries. And we have to continue to act for a dialogue, but it's not possible to have a dialogue when it's a war and there is crime committed. Of course not, but we need to be ready for the dialogue and have the dialogue today inside in our parliament, constituencies, and so on. And to think about the OSCE as a whole region. And by this, I see that it's also important for us to meet in the standing committee. So that will be sent, not as close as now, but in the future, an invitation, because I think and believe very strongly it's important that we meet during this very difficult time when there is the first war inside the OSCE region where another country attack another country in this format. It have been war and there is still war. There but not in this format. And we need to continue our dialogue to stay united inside the OSCE family, to stay united in our beliefs and strength. And I do also find a support for the draft document sent out by our Secretary General. And we should continue with this and with the add of the things I found here from the dialogue. Is there anybody of you who disagree to this, or can I say adopted, and hopefully we will, next time we meet, it should be to say that it's peace in Ukraine. Let's take the next step to rebuild, and not for us to rebuild, but to support Ukraine to rebuild its country. I find agreement for this. And please, to Mr. Mikita Potorayev and Mr. Artur Gerasimov, our warmest regards. Bring them with you to the Ukrainian people and to your colleagues in the Ukrainian delegation, because we are with you. Thank you, dear colleagues. Wish you all the best. I close the meeting. Bye.